Releasing music, release strategies. This is about world-class music campaigns. You know, finished music, now what? What's next? This session is about getting your music heard, getting it out there and making an impact, you know, from Soundcloud to a streaming strategy, pre-save tactics to PR, okay? We're going to break down what a world-class release campaign looks like in 2025. So let's meet the people that do this for a living. Some of these guys I know you've heard from today. You know who these guys are, so we'll do some brief introductions, but we've also got a new panelist here joining us as well, Jason. So do you want to say a quick introduction, mate?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Jason. I've been in the industry for like 20 years now. I actually started at Toolroom about 14 years ago, which is quite funny. They've actually accepted me back, which is quite nice. But during that period, it was at major labels, PR companies, events, organizations, agencies, and it was a big focus on supporting artists in publishing and revenue. And it all started from a release that I did as a kid, and I got no money. And I wanted to realize, how do I find the money? Where's the money coming from? So that's what basically put me into the industry, and that's what I'm doing now, is sharing my knowledge over the last 20-odd years.
Okay, and just really quickly, because there's obviously some guys here that might not have heard from you, just a quick reintroduction from each of you.
Hi, I'm not Jack, I'm Graham, Jack Steele, but I run 7 SoundCloud accounts and have 300,000 followers on SoundCloud and talk about SoundCloud a lot, so I'm filling in for Jack. I've been on SoundCloud for 15 years now and use it as one of my main platforms, so we'll be talking a lot about SoundCloud.
Hi, I'm Mikey Whyte. I'm the head of marketing and events at Toolroom. I work across marketing across kind of all aspects of the business at Toolroom, including the label, our events, the brand, artist development, and the academy.
Hi everyone, I'm Miles, Chief Operating Officer at Toolroom. I spend a lot of time thinking about how we sell music and grow our streams, because that's pretty much the biggest part of our business is our label and stream specifically, so hopefully we can get into a bit of that today.
Yeah, my name is Gernot. Some of you have seen me in some of the previous panels. I'm filling in for Jack as well. I run a music marketing agency called Walter Circus. Together with Walter Circus and Toolroom, we host the Artist Development Masterclass, where we teach up-and-coming artists sort of how to make it in the music industry. And I work for a music management company called Metropole Talent, where we look after artists like Panpots, Shimza, Len Faki, David Löhlein, and so on. And
Excellent.
At Metropole, I'm really heavily focusing on the marketing, so that's why I guess I have some stuff to say about music marketing.
We've got a packed panel with some real experience here. All right, let's dive in. So new artists, no team, no budget, you know, little or no fan base in some instances as well. You know, how do you put together a release plan? What's the minimum? What's a viable release plan for artists looking like in 2025?
I guess it's changed. You know, minimum used to be less, if that makes sense. I mean, we used to run labels at Toolroom. Outside of the Toolroom ecosystem, we run quite a few other record labels. And we'd be able to put out campaigns that would effectively be quite minimal, pack shot, couple of animated videos, put it out into the world, and they would often do quite well because it was a different time in terms of algorithms on Spotify. We'll go into that. It was a different time in terms of the amount of what type of marketing was cutting through. So I think it's definitely got more intense, and also just the sheer volume of music now. You're really fighting that. I mean, that's really increased over the last few years, and we've totally noticed that. So you're having to do more, probably, so that a minimum viable is probably more than it was. For me, I still think, I guess it's 3 phases of a campaign for me, are the kind of minimum good practice. So at the start of a campaign, it's building anticipation. So, you know, potentially documenting the creative process, letting people know there's music coming, so you're not just landing on an out now. So a kind of anticipation phase. I think for that out now phase, you still need, you know, a good 3 to 5 assets to push the release that aren't just salesy. Again, we'll get into that. It needs to be more storytelling. And then thirdly, I still think you need this as a minimum, and it's probably the harder bit. It's the social proof. It's seeding the record into the culture. So it's things like DJ plays, radio support, blog support. So for me, that's how I frame it. It's still those three phases of a campaign.
And the thing predominantly, like, what are the things that you can control as well? You know, what are the things that you don't have to have either, you know, capital for, or, you know, like if you're not releasing on a label that has, you know, that has the budget to put behind you, and, you know, what are those things? And that's, you know, predominantly social media. That's the story that you can write without any influence, without any prejudice, you know, without any third party saying, you know, you should do it like this. You know, that's something you have complete control over. And also, like, you can get really creative with as well. And that's what we're seeing in recent years, especially with the, the advent of TikTok as well, the opportunities and the things that I see nowadays that are classed as music marketing. If you'd shown me that 10 years ago, I would just be like, you're absolutely mad. You know, when you look at like some of the stuff that you see on TikTok now and how that's really working for artists and like building their profile. So for me, like crafting a really compelling social narrative, you know, across those phases as well, you know, like any story, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and really like building that momentum and maintaining that, especially if you're an artist that really wants to win on DSPs like Spotify, Apple Music, where you can get that increased editorial playlisting and, you know, and the footprint of that record growing internationally, being able to build that momentum over time. That's the trickiest part of that.
So how do artists how can you build that momentum? How can you imitate, like you're saying, like what a label does, you know, for a label? Because some of these artists as well are using things like DistroKid, Label Radar, you know, or even just self-releasing music. How can they imitate like what a label does of getting that music out there?
I guess you can still think like a campaign manager. Like you can still be organized and have your campaign planned out, you know, 3 to 4 weeks prior to release. You can still write a campaign. There's nothing stopping you do that. I think as well, you can make your own ecosystem look like a label in the sense of having a good brand, a good consistency. If it's your Instagram page, you know, a crisp bio, SoundCloud profile, it can all look aligned and professional. There's nothing stopping you doing that. And I guess the other thing is doing your own promo cycle, and that's probably the harder bit, I'd say. But getting in early, building relationships with DJs, building relationships with blogs, people like Graham that promote music. There's a lot you can do yourself there, but that probably is the harder bit, I'd say.
And just to add to that, I think obviously a lot of has been said about social media, and I dislike social media. I think the only way to get around it as an artist, as a creative, is to see it as a business. And there are so many different tools out there where you can schedule stuff, and you can organize yourself in a way where you have a release in 3 weeks. You know, you've got yourself covered, planned, with your press release as well. Lots of PR goes into it. But obviously focusing on the right blogs. But the main thing is, I think for social media, it is so easy to do a plan. Do a plan, get it out the way, know what's happening, and really, really understand it so you can focus on what's more important in other areas.
So what's the first thing that an artist should be doing, say 4-6 weeks before a release? What's the very first thing they should be starting with that plan to kind of kickstart this momentum?
Well, firstly, I think a press release is definitely a press.
I think also DJ promotion, so that you send the track out to other DJs so they can play it, and you can ideally you collect videos of them playing it, so when the track comes out, that you can make it look bigger than what it is. So you have, I don't know, if you have 5 mates or like 5 DJs are playing the track, then you already have 5 content pieces. And then you can utilize this from the moment when the track comes out, or even in like the leading up to the release.
And integrate that into the EPK or press release.
In terms of DJ promo, because obviously, you know, labels at Toolroom, we've built up that relationship with big DJs. As new artists, I think it's quite hard for the guys to kind of actually reach DJs. Do you think that's something that's worth investing in, using promo services, or investing time in building up their own, promo lists?
Yeah, but it depends on which artist you're aiming at. Like, if you want DJs playing it, and there'll be DJs in your genre that'll play it. And I always think, like, there's the headliner, which you can DM, but you're not going to get heard from by the headliner. But who else is playing on that lineup? Who else is playing at slot 2, slot 3, slot 4? Like, if you think, like, some of these clubs that open at midnight and the first slot is packed, that's still playing to a full club, and that person's DMs are much easier to get to, and you could build a little kind of list of like 10 artists that might play my track if I reached them on DMs and sent it to them personally and said, hey, I've got a track coming out on Toolroom. It's out in a month, but I'm sending it to you first, and I like what you're playing. I think it might fit your sound. I think it might fit in your sets. Can you see what you think, sort of thing?
So some research of more accessible artists.
Yeah, there's like one of my students. He makes Afro house. He wanted Black Coffee to play his music, and I was like, well, if you DM Black Coffee, he's got millions of fans. He's not going to answer. Rare Blue Moon, he might do. Like, who's playing before Black Coffee? Because he's still playing before Black Coffee. So essentially, if you get him playing your track and Black Coffee hears it, then you're essentially getting it to Black Coffee because that other person's playing it beforehand. And doing that research of just like, who's my artist that I can send that music to? You get 20 of them, and 20 that turns into video. That's content. And then obviously from the 6 weeks before, 4 weeks before, like pitch it to Spotify, like go on your Spotify for artists, pitch your track to Spotify, write 3 lines just like what the vibe is, what playlist you want to be on. Like go and look at Spotify playlists and go, which playlist does my music fit on from Spotify's own one, and send them 3 that you think your playlist was. Do the work for them. And then like maybe if you've got a budget, maybe put that in there. And then like for us from a blog point of view, like from a data transmission point of view, pitch it to us, send it to us, and send, like, because we upload tracks every day. We upload 2 tracks every day and across house, tech house, drum and bass, jungle, disco, and we've got channels across our Soundclouds that we upload music for, and we break music first across our channels, and we work 3 or 4 weeks in advance. Send it to us.
I wanted to ask you, so you like to receive the tracks before they're out, like way ahead?
Yeah, like we work, like my schedule's booked up for like, I'm working on, say my mix series, I'm working on August mixes already. For my premiere series, house has got a bit weird. Like, you only get them a few weeks before, but if I can get them 3 or 4 weeks before, then great, they're in the schedule. Our drum and bass page, like that's booked up 3 or 4 weeks or 4 or 5 weeks in advance. But just send it to us. My email's Graham@Data Transmission. Just say hi. I watch your panel at BDME, and send me the track. And it's out on this label. It's out on this date. Can you upload it to SoundCloud and YouTube? Yeah, cool. Let's listen to it.
I think also what's important is that Spotify and Apple are very different. So I've got a friend who works at Spotify, and there's very specific things they want to see. They don't want a full description of how you feel and how you made the track, and it's like, made me feel so groovy, and I loved it, and it was great. They want to see how you're also promoting the track. You know, you've got a promo team on board, you've got a plugger on board. They're always going to be directing music to Spotify. Those are like, it needs to be quick, but you also need to just up the Spotify, make them feel special, because they go through hundreds. Apple is different. It's easier to get to know someone on Apple, and you can actually send them an email to, and through the portal as well, and actually go a bit more extensive than Spotify, because I know that Spotify is 600 characters or something.
So is it worth really, pitching to Spotify if you're an independent artist, no budget, you haven't got pluggers, and you're releasing independently? Is it still worth them?
Yeah, that where he's saying, like, if you've got no budget, that things that you could be putting in that bottom line is, I've had a premiere on Data Transmission. I've reached out to Sarah Story because she's my sound and she's playing on Radio 1, and I've kind of locked that one champion down on radio, and they're going to be playing, or Ariel Free's playing it, and it's like, you've got no budget and you can't afford a plugger or so this, but you have done yourself. You've got support online, you've got support on radio just by hitting a couple of people. That looks so much stronger than nothing.
And I just want to say, like, the argument that you don't have a plugger, I feel like is a bit invalid, because you have a plugger, which is yourself. You can do it yourself. You can get the knowledge on how to plug tracks into Spotify playlists, into independently created playlists. And I think that's where it's important for you to get the knowledge of how these things work, and then you just execute them. You do it yourself.
And I think another thing as well with tastemakers is that sometimes you might tap up your top 10 AAA DJs, and like one of them might play it, but those other 9, they may just start to get to know you. So the practice in doing that yourself when you don't have the budget to do it, the beauty of that is that you get to understand the process, but you also start to build your own B2B network. Because it might be a case where they're like, thank you for sending it, not quite right for me. Do you know what I mean? But they might give you some feedback. So like going through that process yourself allows you to really understand like the act of it and your genre and the people that are going to help you win in the long run. Like, there's a lot of artists out there that have had tastemaker support that's made their careers.
Agreed.
And Spotify, ladies first.
Even being in here, like if you're making techno, Anya Schneider's walking around, go and say hello, go and introduce yourself. Like that one-to-one contact. I make techno too. I've got releases coming out. Would you mind? Can I send you some music? Like that's the good thing about these conferences. You can actually be that first person face to face. You know.
And obviously, like people only work with people they like. So Apple is far better than Spotify with the communication, because you can, you fake it till you make it. You can say you've got this, you've got that, but when you do actually get something from like a blog or something with a link to Apple, then email them, tell them, highlight it, and then you start to build a rapport. And those rapports are the foundations for future releases. Again, Apple, Spotify, very different. But yeah.
That said, though, I do think, I don't know if you agree, Gernot, the impact of editorial on Spotify is decreasing and it's more algorithmic now, right? Is that true?
Yeah, it's so, of course, if you get the very big editorial like Techno Bunker, you get a good amount of streams out of it. But chances are so small for up-and-coming artists to even get into these playlists. I always hear I want to get into Techno Bunker and that, but actually as an up-and-coming artist, you make like 60, 70, 80% with the algorithmic playlist, like radio, like, yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about social media and promoting releases on social media, kind of where we started on there as well. Like, have we got some good creative examples, ideas that we can give the attendees here of promoting a release from those early stages through social media?
I think the key thing, the way to frame this is storytelling, not broadcasting. So again, previously you would consider it enough to make some really polished assets that pushed an out now message. Buy this, I've made this track, it's out now. And that simply isn't cutting through anymore. People want to know the story behind the record. And on a marketing level, that's the win at the moment. That's what we're finding at Toolroom, is when we get into the culture about a track, more so than a commercial kind of broadcast about it, that's what is moving the dial most and getting the most attention. So, for example, we've got a remix coming out from Eats Everything in a couple of weeks, I think, isn't it? And again, previously you'd just make a really nice polished video of Eats like DJing and high impact, out now sales message, and put some ad budget behind that, and that would have done some damage and sold. Whereas now what we're doing is we're just telling stories about that track, which is a remix of an old hard house record that was big in a club called Trade in London in the 90s. And so we're just talking about that time in music history. And that actually is much more impactful on social in terms of getting numbers and engagement, and therefore more commercial return. And so for you guys as new artists, it's thinking of how you can tell stories, even about the creative process, rather than it being an out now asset. It might be, here's 6 bass lines I did on this track, and this is the one that was the best one.
Where the sample originated from, the creative process.
Yeah, and I think if you zoom out from that and look at social media from a bird's eye view, when you log on to social, it's not just artists that you follow. You're getting bombarded by absolutely everything, and it could be ads, it could be like fashion brands, it could be, the latest film, and you're getting served ads for that. So if you're just constantly pushing messages out there, like, I've got a new record coming out, buy it, stream it, pre-save it. Building an emotional connection with your audience is a way to do that, and showing, like, getting under the hood as to who you are as an artist, and explaining that the inspiration behind the record. It could just be, digging into the sample. It could be the DNA of the artist. That, why did that artist inspire you? Why am I remixing their track? Do you know what I mean? There's so many deeper layers and complexities that you can get into to talk about music, rather than just here's me playing it in the club, it's out next Friday, and that's so much more impactful.
Yeah. The other one is just go really fun with it and just sit. I had an artist where they just made a piece of content and they just and it was just going through kick drums, and it was like
basically what every producer does. With
Right.
snares,
It was one of the most engaged pieces of content ever. And he went, oh, and then the last one was the one he chose, and it kind of went into the track, and everyone got it, and everyone laughed because everyone had been in exactly the same place. They just, it was really fun.
Actually think about your own individual journey that you've had whilst making that music.
relatable content, isn't it? You know, that's the sort of, you know, that kind of virality. If you tap into stuff that everyone can go, yeah, do you know what I mean? I get that. You know, the producer life, like the studio tan. Do you know what I mean? You know, not having any, you know, not seeing daylight that often. You know, things like that. You know, that in the producer community that people can relate to. But what I will say, in contrary to that, is that you're just speaking to a producer audience there as well. So it depends on what your objective is as well. You know, we've kind of been talking about streaming a lot here as well. You might be an artist that wants to win on Bandcamp. You might be selling on like a small vinyl-only label on there. It all depends on what your individual objective is as an artist at the end of the day.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about some other platforms as well then. You mentioned SoundCloud a few times in your introduction. I think I counted 7.
Hi.
So let's talk about SoundCloud and how artists can use that, because SoundCloud's a platform that's been around quite a while, you know, and it's something that I've always received demos on since its inception to now. How can artists utilize SoundCloud to kind of build release hype?
If you use SoundCloud as a social media, if you think of it as a social media, and it's an audio social media, if you think about the kind of concepts of social media, it's got comments, it's got likes, it's got shares, it's got messaging. SoundCloud's got all those. And start using it as a social media, so start commenting. There's a really good case study that SoundCloud, I know Jack would have talked about if he was here. They released a record, they found a record by an artist called Casio, and essentially this track has, when I last looked, had like 30 million streams, but it started its life by basically, he just uploaded little clips of the track, and then he messaged loads of people within SoundCloud, and kept it all in app and all in platform, and just kind of asked people what they thought. What do they think of this? What do they think of that? And used it literally like you would do on other platforms. That feedback then kind of changed the track, and it kind of uploaded new versions, and kind of just kept using it, the messaging, going back and forth. And then all of a sudden it started growing in popularity and growing numbers, because like the final version dropped, and essentially it had kind of grown this life of its own by just staying within platform. What it did have was a massive sample, but then because it had got so much heat just from within platform, essentially then it got signed by a massive label, and then by a major essentially, and then blew up to a bigger thing. And all he did was literally just use messaging, use likes, use comments, got people to really comment and reply to every comment, and took that feedback and then changed that track, and just did it all live and public. One thing you've got to remember with SoundCloud is 98% of people that use SoundCloud use it on app. 2% use it on desktop. So literally, how do you look on app in SoundCloud? Like, that's your home. Like, what do you look like? There's so many features in app that are not on desktop. Really, really spend, like I was saying earlier, spend time learning that platform, because what you look like in app is different to what you look like online.
And are there ways to drive fans from SoundCloud to other platforms as well?
Yeah, like I use things like Hyped It, like I build download gates for things, and I kind of capture emails and I capture data that way. But I also just try and use, like, I just try and get as many reposts on the way SoundCloud works really is if you get lots of reposts on a track, it kind of gets its own virality and it stays everything in platform. So when if you're releasing a track, just send it to a load of your mates and say, can you repost it? Can you comment on it? Can you like on it? Especially first 24 hours. Like I've found that if you get loads of reposts first 24 hours, it really, really pushes. There's also a new feature within SoundCloud. It's called Amplify. If you go to your track within the first, as soon as it's uploaded, you can click the Amplify button, and basically SoundCloud AI listen to the track and then listen to what people have been listening to recently, and then show it in app to them. So they're basically trying to drive your first 1,000 plays to help you grow in app. You also now in SoundCloud can see your top fan. If you go into your insights, you can see your top fans, like MySpace used to be. I don't know if anyone was on that. Literally, you can go and see your top fans, and then you can message your top fans in-app to say, hey, I see you've been listening to lots of my music. I've just dropped something new. Do you want to have a listen to this? Similarly, you can also see your least engaged fans and go, I see you listened to my music a long time ago. Like, I've got something new. Maybe you'll like this. And really kind of keeping people in app and really using it in app. The other things to think about is, like, there's no buy links on the app. So those people putting buy links on your buy now to send it to Beatport or Bandcamp, the buy link doesn't work in app, so that means no one sees it. But if you put it in the description, then people can go and come off app to see you.
That's really interesting, especially when 98% are using it as the app.
Yeah.
Just a really minor point from my side, like, if there are any people in the room that are thinking of setting up record labels, I've spoken to quite a few people that are running labels. SoundCloud's actually been our fastest growing platform for growth commercially this year and last year, I think, as well. It's really going for it. And I think it's going to be close to Beatport pretty soon in terms of turnover for us. So that's how quickly it's growing. And it's also a really excellent platform for superfans, which is I guess the buzzword in the music industry at the moment. It's like, how do we further and deepen and even monetize, to be honest, the connection that superfans have with you. And it's a great platform for that.
Yeah, do you know, so in the last 5 years, there's been it's had a mad resurgence because of platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels, where you make something and you show it off on those platforms, but you need somewhere to send people to listen to the full track or download the full track. So the resurgence in the last 5 years of 18 to 24s on SoundCloud is crazy. Also, the dance music is one of the highest viewed musics within the app as well. Like, I think it's like 54% of people use it for dance music. So the dance music community within there, and also the people find music first from SoundCloud. Also thinking from a label point of view, that, like you're saying, the monetization from SoundCloud, they have a thing called fans. It's a different model to Spotify. Spotify, with SoundCloud, what people listen to, the artists earn straight off of it, as opposed to Spotify, it kind of goes into a pool and the biggest artists take all the money and the small artists don't. And that's why they're really driving this first 1,000 plays. Spotify recently said that if tracks don't get 1,000 play, then you're not earning off of it. Where SoundCloud flipped it and said, we're going to give you 1,000 plays, and we're going to show you how to monetize it, and the monetization is going to be much better for you, and you can reach all your most engaged fans.
So it sounds like SoundCloud is the one for new artists to kind of really be focusing on, to utilize.
Yeah, I love it. Like when you're in that early stage, when you're making bootlegs and edits, like drop them on SoundCloud. There's a little kind of hack, like if your SoundCloud gets pulled down, make the track 10 minutes long, because there's a monetization point with tracks that if it goes over 10 minutes and you put a long bit of gap in it, it kind of keeps that sample up there. We also like kind of build tracks. Like we had a track we put up in March. It's a Kate Bush edit, and it's done 70,000 plays in 4 weeks. And we're now talking. The artist is now talking to a bigger label because it's had so much growth in such a short space that it's going to get signed.
So I feel like the average music listener on SoundCloud is a lot different than the one on Spotify. On Spotify, it's just a passive music consumer. You put on a playlist and the track kind of plays in the background. You have no idea which artist is being streamed. Versus on SoundCloud, it's a lot more. You have a lot stronger connection with the music that you're listening to, because you don't just put it on in the background and the music plays, but you actually go out and you kind of like search for what you like. And connecting with fans on SoundCloud, I feel like in the early stage, this gives you a much bigger push, because those are really like the tastemakers amongst their music, amongst their friend group, where they then actually go and tell their friends, like, look, I discovered this really cool artist on SoundCloud. You should actually go and check out this artist. And yeah, I feel like this amplifies the career at the early stage a lot more than just being present on Spotify.
Yeah, and I think as well, SoundCloud as a platform, it's a real grassroots platform. If you're a singer-songwriter and you've recorded some ideas, the first place you're going to is SoundCloud. If you're a DJ producer and you've done a bootleg of a track that you love, you're putting it on SoundCloud. If you're doing a mix, you're putting it on SoundCloud. The sense of community on SoundCloud is really strong. Like you follow your favorite artists there. A lot of people start their careers there as well. It's at the very center, and its proximity to culture of music creation. That's for all genres. Is so strong. I think it's a brilliant platform, and just to highlight what we're saying commercially here, the way that they're rewarding their artists as well. Like you just can't argue with that. Like they've got its purpose is very pure.
And also just A&Rs spend a lot of time there browsing. So, I know our director of music has signed a lot of talent, because we want to get talent early. That's kind of the game. And yeah, we've signed artists just from literally browsing and going through it and finding people that way. We don't use like data to sign people, by the way. Our A&Rs just with our ears, it's not with numbers. And yeah, so if you're an artist looking to get signed, having a good SoundCloud presence, therefore, is going to be important.
I remember a story back in the day, scrolling SoundCloud and actually found Chris Malinchak. So good to me. Couldn't offer the same sort of money that Ministry of Sound offered him in the end, but that was just found floating around on there. Miguel Campbell, Something Special, that was floating around on SoundCloud as well in those early days.
Yeah, I used to, John Summit used to email me 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. He'd literally, every track from a premiere, he'd be dropping edits and free downloads, and then he'd be spending money on reposting them and really building that number up. And just every release, it was pressure on building that SoundCloud number. But also going back to the release strategy, like we'll kind of have a SoundCloud edit ready to go before a release, so that on the download gate is building more followers for our Spotify page, so that we really focus using the edits to build the followers, so that when the release drops, so that it goes out to a bigger Spotify following.
Let's talk about another platform, because I heard it mentioned a couple of times actually on the chat. Beatport in itself, where the music's going, the music's getting sold. I think artists very much really kind of obsess almost about getting in charts on Beatport, and realistically, do you think that's quite difficult for new artists to get into like top 100 charts?
I don't think so. Like I think it's achievable. Like genre top 100 is within your reach. Many of our students have and do achieve that. For what it's worth, I still think Beatport is the barometer for our scene. Like it's, we're obviously very proud that we're best-selling label on there twice a year. Have to get that in, sorry. And for us, even though it's not the most commercial, biggest return, for me, it's still the barometer that the scene looks at. And if you've had a top 10, then that does, really impact you. I think in order to get into that top 100 genre level, it's about velocity, like at the start. I think if you've got a nicely engaged fan base, and this is where we spoke earlier today, that having a smaller engaged fan base is more important than just being obsessed with big numbers that don't really care about you. If you can leverage them to get in early and buy a record in the first 1 to 3 days, it doesn't take as many as you think to break into that top 100, and then it's got that visibility. And getting visibility on Beatport on a chart, then it's up to the track, and it will move up. But it isn't out of your reach, As I said, many of our students do it, and it has pushed their careers on.
Do you think that, and it's a lot of that comes down to labels that they're releasing on, new artists getting onto those labels, and one thing that we get so many new artists obviously ask us about is like, how do I get on Toolroom? And we often talk to them about picking the right label and trying to find the right label to release on as well. That's obviously a big part of this.
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's certain labels that are really strong on certain stores, and there's some of the bigger labels tend to be more just focused on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube maybe, because that's where their commercial wins are. But there's some that are experts at the Beatport chart, and that's something to reflect on. But even for smaller labels, you do have the Hype chart now, which is a very clever way that they got smaller labels to become sort of medium-sized suppliers to them, and that has its own little ecosystem, and is also seen by A&Rs of the bigger labels.
So how does that work? How does the Hype chart curate?
It's just a separate chart, and it's I don't know how they set it up. Graham, because it's not something we do within Toolroom, because we're too big to be on it.
It's the newer and smaller labels under a certain amount of sales. You have to, because we're on it. We use Hype a lot for our labels.
So they have a team that curates that?
No. So you pay to be on Hype. It's £10 a month, I think, something. Yeah, £10 a month, and you pay to be a Hype label. But then you have access to the Hype chart. And it's the same, it's on sales, but obviously it's less sales. And if you can, again, once you climb into that Hype chart, then people are looking at it, because it's not all the big artists. If you go into the main Beatport chart, it's all the big artists. And if you're looking for tracks that are a little bit more underground, a little bit more kind of not the mainstream, then Hype chart is a great place to find that kind of music. And yeah, if you're a brand new label or you're a certain amount of sales, then you can apply to be on Hype.
Okay, that's really interesting. So if releases don't work out, new artists trying to get music out there, sometimes it's going to take a while. The truth is, sometimes the word, it could flop, a release just not hit. How can an artist learn from that? How can they stay positive from that? How can they bounce back and keep moving?
I guess it happens to all of us, is all I say. Like, we've had many releases at Toolroom that you pin your hopes on that would be successful, and for whatever reason it doesn't happen. It's just a learning curve, isn't it? And I think that's part of the game of being a creative, is you've got to roll with that. But records do have a habit of coming back as well. So just because it's not hit a chart position on Beatport, it's still there. It's still there in online, and may find another lease of life.
Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts. Like, I had a student basically. He had a record. He'd sent it to Salado. He'd sent it to Camel Fat. They're all playing it. It got played to 15,000, 20,000 people over a weekend. Was about to get signed. You could see that they're going to play it all summer. It was going to be kind of this momentum of like, this is a great track. It was going forward at speed, right? And then a pandemic happened, and basically the record then got shelved. Didn't go ahead. When it kind of came out of the pandemic, it wasn't. They'd lost the momentum. It lost the kind of thing, and it kind of like the artist was flawed, because essentially this could have been a make or break moment, and it was like, well, you've had these wins. You had some wins. You've had two big artists really playing your record. Let's look at what you have won out of this record. You have got this. You have got that. You've now got a better connection to that artist. Then the artist then sent more music to it, and then more music got signed, and that then became a bigger record, because it was, let's look at what you did achieve with this record, and what momentum you did get from it, and those wins are just as important as a giant win.
To add, sorry, I thought he was going to. No, sorry, I thought someone else was going to take over and add to that. All right, let's talk about artists working and collaborating with other people. Jason, you've got a lot of knowledge on this when we're talking royalties and things, because I think new artists don't necessarily think about this, or sometimes maybe, I don't know if the word's not caring about it, but they're so obsessed with just getting out there and not even thinking about royalty splits and earning money from their music.
It's a funny one. We're all creatives here, and we love creating music. We love creating music together, and when we do that, it's almost like the business part of that just like takes a sidestep, and you just box it up and you forget about it. And unfortunately, there's so many occasions where I've been working with bands. We've been in South Africa, Black Motion, where they're a big band there, also like Shimza, but that sort of caliber. They worked together for ages, but they didn't have solid agreements in place. So the students on the course, the Toolroom Academy Artist Development Masterclass, which you might find booklets on the seats, we do teach you about how to sort of approach certain situations. There's been a couple of interesting ones about writing camps, how to sort of enter these writing camps. Do you go in there with, I've been invited to this writing camp, artists, I'm so special, like, I feel so good, this is going to be great. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, they're getting your creative energy. And after those 3 days, what is to say that, you're going to get any percentage? So, and it is a very delicate situation to have. You need to bounce. You need to figure out what the values of. Sometimes it's worth giving up something for a greater exposure. Other times you need to set solid grounds. As soon as you go into a studio, even if it's your best mate, even if me and Gernot went in, I'd get him to sign, 50-50, equal share. But something needs to be signed. Something needs to be signed, because when money comes into play, everything gets ruined. Creative manager gets ruined.
And is that the same with labels? Like, if you're, because I think that's the same thing with new and emerging artists. Like, sometimes they're so excited that a label has shown interest in music. And I've had interesting conversations with new artists, and they're like, so-and-so's going to sign my music. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Now they're showing interest in your music. It's not them doing you a favour. Sometimes I think they feel like that, and it's like, what are they doing for you?
Yeah, it's obviously on the label side, but stepping out of that, like, we have a responsibility to think of the kind of dynamic here. And as artists, you have to I'd really recommend having a good basic knowledge of the basic contract terms on heads of agreements on singles, because you can get, as you said, Pete, you can get overexcited and sign something. And before you know it, you've given options away, or you've signed something for perpetuity, or the royalty rates poor and comparative to other labels. So don't get into the headspace of thinking that you should just sign whatever a label wants. You should always take time to learn about music contracts. I've definitely know a lot of artists that have regretted that.
As a label, would it, if an artist came back to you and said, okay, cool, but I've got these many questions, would you be a bit like, or would you respect that? Would you,
I guess it's in the execution, isn't it? I think, it depends on, if an artist is like right at the start of their career and they're steaming in too hard on certain things, it is a bit, it depends on I guess, the distance between the size of the label and the size of the artist's career. But you should never feel bad about negotiating. Like, everything's a negotiation in the arts and business in general. You should, and people respect that. I respect that if an artist really knows the onions and is like unpacking a contract a bit. I guess it's understanding in independent electronic music, ultimately, it's still going to be your live income that's like the bulk of your career. It's still like 80-20 really, even for artists like Mark Knight and others, 80% live, 20% music. And the music is what's going to get you those opportunities. So the bigger picture, I think, is releasing the music with the best label you can, but also being mindful of your rights and the contract and not signing something you don't fully understand.
If I can, and like making sure that the label is working every inch of it. Because like we have the benefit of being label side and also having our own management company as well. So we can dance between both camps of being, like we are, we take your art and your intellectual property and then we exploit that. And we do try to do the best for that for you. But, we also have our management roster as well when we work with really big labels on the other side. And, we push them and we press them, like, what are you going to do for this? Like, how can we work in partnership to get the most out of this internationally? Like, what markets should we be focusing on? Where does the artist strength lies, and how does that marry up with where the label lies as well? So it's pushing for your own good. It's like being your own supporter, your own manager as well if you don't have one. But just it's the execution of how you do that, because what you don't want to do, like Miles has said, is steam in too hard and then be like, oh, that's the artist with the ego. That's the diva. You never want to come across like. Yeah,
you want to build a
like
relationship up with labels, right?
It is. It's a partnership. Yeah.
The other thing, once you get past the actual contracts, like what you guys, I know, obviously I've heard, we talk about this, but you get really excited by artists that then come with ideas and for actual like release campaigns, and they come to you saying, not just what are you going to do to promo it, but obviously, and I know who you're going to mention straight away, some of the artists we're working with at the label that come in and really have great vision and direction of actually marketing and release campaigns.
Yeah, and that's how the tables have turned in the last 10 years, where, 10 years ago, social media, or 10 to 15 years ago, it was a piece of cake, wasn't it? If we could go back to then, you'd post a picture or a video on Facebook and you'd get like 5,000 likes and, 100 comments, now that's not the case, and now like the onus is on artists to develop their own channels and have their own community. It's working those two things in conjunction, because like if we're working a record from like obvious plugs here are our management roster. You've got Tony Romero, who we've recently just signed, Cruzy, Acel, Martin Eichen, and Kasim. And individually, they have their own proposition, their own style, their own tone of voice. And when we're doing a campaign with them, like it's our responsibility is to run the campaign through those two silos. And that's our brand as Toolroom, as an authority in dance music. How do we communicate that through our community, our ecosystem, and then, to the world through like third parties, like radio promo, pluggers, that kind of thing. But how is the artist telling their story? And how do we keep on them to do that? So, like I said, like Cruzy and Tony are brilliant examples. They come to the table with loads of ideas as to how they can exploit, their idea through their own unique, social media activations. And I just literally had a conversation with someone who's in the audience earlier as well about promoting shows, and when a promoter asks me if I should be doing collab posts on particular events, my advice to her was, across the year, let's say you've got 40, 50 gigs, let's say there's maybe 5 of those gigs where you go, yes, absolutely, because you want to see like the Fuse Brussels artwork on your page or the Fabric artwork on your page. But to the promoters that you're saying no to, you don't just say no, you offer a solution. You say like, this is the idea that I've come up with that can promote me DJing for your brand, but it's in my own tone of voice. So it's like really understanding your understanding the algorithm, how your brand sits within that, and how you can constantly tell your story in a compelling and creative way. You know, and when we work with artists, to come back to the original point in question, when we're working with artists who have a really firm idea as to who they are and their vision and how they can do that, that's the dream. You know, when we on our artist development masterclass program, one of the first things you do is understanding your vision. You know, it's before you get into anything, it's understanding your vision and being able to write that down on a piece of paper. You know, and if you can't do that, that's the first thing you need to do, because that informs everything that you do as an artist. And that's why these are the people that we decide to manage, because like they get it.
Really, really insightful stuff. I'm looking at the time and just thinking if we've got some questions here to any of the individual panelists. I think there's going to be quite a few here. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go into some questions from the guys. So we'll just bring a microphone round for you.
Thanks. Hi, guys. Thanks for all the insights. I have a question more from a side of a label. It's like a new label. So basically, what type of a contract a new small label should be offering to the artists? Like the split, 50-50, 80-30, 80-20, or how much? Because obviously now I'll be signing artists who are like bigger, so basically I'm leveraging their audience more. So what should I be expecting? How to approach them respectfully? Because obviously I don't want to go and be like, yeah, we'll be splitting 50-50, but I'm taking more from them than they from me.
I mean, it really does depend, but the convention would be, for a new label, would be 50-50. That's the general convention. I think for labels like Defected, Toolroom, Defected actually put out a press statement, I think when Wes Saunders acquired Defected, that their kind of minimum and normal royalty rate would be 30%. So that's what you're looking at for bigger labels. So therefore, to sort of work the logic of that, if you're a smaller label that's potentially offering, you know, less in terms of brand recognition, so on and so forth, 50% is a fair percentage, and generally the convention within independent music. But there's other parameters to consider, like length of term is also interesting. Like how long are you having it for? Is it perpetuity? That's often the key negotiation factor, actually, more so than percentage. Option, are you going to then get an option on the next release? And then within that 50-50, what counts as recoupable costs? So, you know, if you're going to be spending on marketing, and is there a minimum spend on marketing? There's so many different negotiation variables. I think people often get hung up on the royalty bit, and actually the other bits are probably just as important, if not more so.
Yeah, absolutely, and advances as well. Like, are you paying out advances for, you know, to sign the records too? That kind of thing. And like the third-party costs, really, the marketing costs is, you know, it's a lot of things to actually balance out.
An advance is an advance. You've got to pay it back, right? So, you know, the third-party costs, you don't necessarily have control of that unless you negotiate that up front. So it's great to have a fat advance, but essentially you don't know if there's a music video, if there's, you know, additional marketing fees, ad fees, or whatever. So it's good to have those upfront discussions.
Yeah, because sometimes I know new artists have said to me, like when they've actually got their first statement, which can be rare in itself, you know, even proving as a label that you're going to be someone that accounts and pays, because that is the sad state of it really out there as well. A lot of labels aren't even accounting to artists as well. But actually being upfront of what those costs are, because a lot of new artists, when they get back their first statement, it's ridiculous, some of the things that they didn't realise, getting charged €500 for a pack shot, and the labels just literally use their logo and put some text on it. So asking for a bit of clarity in these sorts of things, don't be afraid to. There's a balance. I think what Miles said, it's for the artist side of it, sorry to deviate a bit, but just understanding exactly what are the key things in a contract that make a difference, and don't be afraid to ask a few questions on that. But for a label, I agree, 50-50 I think is fair, and it depends on what the work you're going to do where you can negotiate that back.
Thanks very much.
Who else had a question? Sorry. There's some over here as well. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your information. When one is supposed to sign a contract, then it would be great to have a lawyer. Where do one find those lawyers?
I have a very cool tip. Use ChatGPT, put the contract into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, is this a fair contract? ChatGPT is super knowledgeable, it doesn't cost you anything, and it gives you already like a direction. And if ChatGPT says, yeah, the contract is fine, you know, it's decent terms, it's like regular terms, then you can be pretty safe.
Will that hold up in court? ChatGPT said I could do that. It's crazy. It is crazy, but it's a great.
I mean, of course, for like big contracts, I would always use a lawyer. But for like if it's a single where you're a starting artist and you have small budgets, you know, hiring a lawyer costs at least 150, 200 euros. So might as well start with ChatGPT and just ask them.
Yeah, depends on your budget, really, doesn't it?
The contract big.
I haven't signed anyone yet, but you know I have to prepare myself for the stuff.
Yeah, it's good to know. Thank you. Another questions? There's been a few hands up over here.
Hi, thanks a lot. What's your take as an independent artist to spend money for meta ads to promote my new song that I just released?
Good question.
I have something to say about that. I think it totally makes sense, not because of the reach you're getting through the meta ad or the plays, but so what we do a lot, and even we had a release yesterday with Penpot, we take 200 to 300 euros and we run a campaign that runs for 3 to 4 weeks. So like essentially the spend per day is very small. But what we noticed is that when you have this meta traffic coming to the release, people that go all the way to the release, they stay on the release. And on Spotify, there's this thing for every track has a quality score. And we see that this drives up the quality score, and if it drives up this quality score enough, then the track is being picked up by Spotify editorial playlists and or is being picked up more by the algorithm. So you kind of like go the detour with the meta ads. So I would, if you can, invest like 100, 200 euros into it and have like a campaign with a long lifespan.
So you link the Spotify link to the ad?
Yeah,
like
link directly to Spotify.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's stuff actually that we teach in the artist development masterclass, hacks like these.
Yeah, totally. And,
Thank you.
And I think about the creative as well. Just so just because you put money behind something doesn't mean it will perform. You still need the creative to be really strong. Think about the hook. Think about the first couple, like 1-2 seconds. I think it depends on what type of release it is, but as I said right at the start, it's the social proof stuff is probably the most effective. If it's animated assets, it's harder to get traction now. So like ideally, like what we'd use for advertising would be live play videos oftentimes, wouldn't it, of a record?
Yeah. If there's like a reputable DJ who's been supporting your record, I mean, nothing validates that more really. You know, if there's someone that you really aspire, someone you really respect within the scene who's supporting your music and championing you as an artist, having that visual proof of that happening in a club context is priceless, really.
Cool, good stuff. I hope that answered your question. Time for probably one or two more, if there's.
Oh, yes. Graham, you mentioned that we should put out edits before the official release, how it should work, and yeah, if there's not going to be copyright issues. And I love edits, I love mashups, so how it's going to work out?
Yeah, with SoundCloud, if you're putting out edits on SoundCloud, then.
But before the release, basically,
I do. We do it. We put an edit out 2 or 3 weeks before it. But we use a download gate to kind of download it. But we set the download gate to kind of go for SoundCloud and Spotify, so that it builds more followers on Spotify, and then it kind of builds that release a bit better.
And use that edit maybe on TikTok, Instagram to just make it viral or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the idea. Okay.
Push the content to the SoundCloud edit to. Essentially, build the edit.
Nice,
basically.
Cool. Thanks.
But also, like just going into the SoundCloud, if you search on SoundCloud repost channels and use like repost exchange, you can push the reposts up on a track, which then push it out to more virality.
But if it's for bigger labels, then it might be issues with copyright, though. Probably.
If it stays up, it stays up. Like
okay.
If it's an edit and it stays up, then
okay.
Unless you're told to take it down, then. Go for it.
Okay, cool.
Great.
Just wanted to make sure.
Just, better to apologise than ask, essentially.
I just want to say one more thing before, if we've got time. With regards to all of the music you're making, I think it's vital to make sure you guys are published like with PPL, broadcast, PRS, all of your music, regardless of what country you're in. You need to look at where your like rights are being looked after. If you want to chat to me after about all this stuff, because I could talk for hours about this stuff, it's proper boring, but that's where the revenue streams are coming from. If your music gets played on radio, then you get X amount from different societies. And also on top of that is that when you do have a release, is to think about, have an instrumental, have an a cappella, and keep these free so that you can use them for synchronizations, for ads, for movies, and then start to build up a catalog, which is 100% ownership of yourself, which is a really nice thing to have. Because quite a lot of people in the studio, you pay for a producer, and at the end of it, like, so okay, cool, there's my extended edit, there's my radio edit. Get an instrumental, get an a cappella. Like really, really like work that money, get the most out of that money, because the revenue streams are events and from publishing.
So much focus is on promotion when really artists should be thinking about what's going to happen beyond that.
It's the business,
the capabilities
it's the business
of earning
side.
money from the music.
And it's boring and it's hard and it's difficult and but once you've done it, once you understand it, it's really, really, really easy. But like I say, everyone wants to chat after.
Talk to Jason. He's very knowledgeable on getting your music registered with PROs and actually making it count and earning money from your music. You've got to start somewhere, even if you think it's going to be a small amount, all right? Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, guys. Round of applause for our panel on this one.